Now, before I go any further, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, it would be much appreciated. It just really helps out how the video goes. It's free, it's easy, so that would be cool. Other than that, let's get into the video. The Detroit Pistons made a lot of moves this offseason. Like, a lot. A lot of moves. Overhauling the entire roster, pretty much. And making a lot of moves that some people thought were questionable. Oh, look at the Pistons, the laughingstock. They're going to continue to be terrible. They're rebuilding, but they're making the wrong moves already. Why did they draft Isaiah Stewart at 16? He's a big that should be stuck in the 80s. Jeremy Grant, $20 million a year for someone who averaged 12 points a game. That is such an overpay. Mason Plumlee, backup center, $9 million. How many centers do you want on your roster? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Your roster's all centers, etc., etc. Why would you trade away Luke Kennard? These were things everyone was saying about the Pistons' moves. Like, this was a consensus take. Some people liked what they were doing. A lot of people thought you overpaid Jeremy Grant. Why would you sign Mason Plumlee? Why would you trade away Luke Kennard? Why would you draft Isaiah Stewart? Saben Lee. Some people were talking about how they didn't even have him on their draft board. They didn't even have him on their board, which is crazy considering he's been one of the more promising rookies in the league since he's got minutes. These were things that were being said about the Pistons. Now fast forward to halfway through the season, which is why I'm making the video, because we've got a pretty good idea of what this team looks like and what it's going to shape up to be. And all of a sudden, when Coach Casey says this team should be good in the next 2 to 3 years, you genuinely believe that. Most rebuilding teams, you would expect it to take 4 to 5 seasons, particularly where the Pistons were at, where they had to trade away Andre Drummond for scraps, Reggie Jackson, all of these players. It was a dark time. It was a very dark time having to watch that team. Fast forwarding to now, where you've got multiple young players that look at the very least like they're going to be solid NBA players. You've got an all-star level player in Jeremy Grant, who you got for $20 million a year, which when you consider other players around the league and what they're getting paid, that's a steal. $20 million a year. He should be upwards of 25 for his production, maybe even 30, given what he can do. And he's just reaching the prime of his career. He wants to be in Detroit as well. You can't undervalue that. You've got all of these things, and you've got an aggressive general manager. And I think Troy Weaver should be up for Executive of the Year. And I'm going to talk exactly why, because when you look at all the moves he has made in such a short period of time to take this team from a team that looked destined for a long rebuild to now, all of a sudden in 2 to 3 years, if you strike on next year's draft where you have a chance at probably a top 3 pick, you have Jeremy Grant, who I could see as being a really good number 2 option. Killian Hayes is yet to really play. He's only played a handful of games. People want to call him a bust. That is never going to happen on this channel. I'm not calling him a bust until he's out of the league, because we're giving him a bit more time than 7 games after being thrown into the fire. I've talked about it before. You know my opinion on Killian Hayes. It hasn't changed. It won't change. Saben Lee, Isaiah Stewart, Saddiq Bey. You've traded for Dennis Smith Jr., who's come in and showed some promising signs. Josh Jackson was signed in free agency. He's been good. I mean, even DeLon Wright has been giving you 11, 5, and 5 on good efficiency, playing defense, playing winning basketball. Mason Plumlee. Some people laughed at me when I said he was like a Jokic light. 2 triple-doubles later, and all of a sudden, who's laughing now? That's all I'm saying. These are all the moves that Troy Weaver has made to take this team from a team that looked lifeless. Where is this team going? Do they have a direction? No, they had no direction. Middling out. They weren't even good enough to really middle out. They were middling, bottoming out. So not quite bottoming out, but not quite in the middle. They were just doing pretty much nothing. The Pistons were looking like a franchise that had no direction, and now all of a sudden there's a clear direction, and a direction that looks very positive. You compare this to other teams that have been rebuilding for seemingly years, and all of a sudden it looks like the Pistons might have already leapfrogged them, particularly if they get a high draft pick in a stacked draft. And all of a sudden the moves Troy Weaver has made really deserve a lot of credit, because for it to come into fruition this quickly, and you look at, more importantly, outside of just the players, the culture. It's one thing to have talent, and obviously you need that, and that's what the Pistons have, but it's another thing to have culture and players that are buying into what you're doing. They like the coach, they like the general manager, they like the environment, they like the team, they want to play, they've got something to prove. And you can see a lot of that in the Pistons team and the roster when you have players like Rodney McGruder even stepping up. You have guys like Saben Lee, say less, I'm going to come in and just make an impact straight away. Isaiah Stewart doing a number of things. And you compare that to other teams like, for example, New Orleans Pelicans. They're a team that has an abundance of talent, so much talent. They should be a team that's in the playoffs. We know why they're not, because Pistons fans know that coach isn't exactly the best coach in the NBA and probably shouldn't have a job. But outside of that, they don't really have an identity. They don't seem to have that kind of culture, and they're 5 games below 500 when they could be a team that could be well in the playoff picture with the talent they have. That's just one example. The Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, they've got Karl Anthony Towns, the number 1 draft pick, D'Angelo Russell, and they're worse than the Detroit Pistons. That has nothing to do with talent. That has to do with what they're building. It also has to do with the Pistons actually building a cohesive roster instead of just drafting players for the sake of it. They're drafting players for fit, for purpose, and for a reason, and that's what I'm seeing with his team, and that's why I'm excited. I think of a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who were written off after they got rid of some of their veteran players. It seemed like most people thought they would take a few years to rebuild, and all of a sudden they were like around 500 straight away. I could see a similar path for the Pistons, maybe not next year, but the year after. If they strike, if they get lucky in the draft lottery, which is very unlikely given Detroit's luck, but if they do happen to get lucky, then all of a sudden you piece around some solid role players, some veteran pieces, an all-star level player in Jeremy Grant, a top pick from this year's draft, and all the rookies and second year and third year players we have. And I could see this team being close to 500 already. I just could see it. They've just been too competitive this year. They could easily be at like 15 wins this season if they had have been able to close out close games. I think they're the worst team in the NBA in close game situations. But just looking at individual players and what they've been able to do, you've got Isaiah Stewart. Just most recently in a game, he showed his mid-range ability. He hit 3 mid-range shots in a row, I believe. He was showing off some touch. He's shown some touch in the paint and ability to post up players. Some people, again, like I mentioned, said he was a traditional big that didn't fit the modern day NBA. I don't watch college basketball, so I can't tell you what he did in college. All I can say is he's shown that he can hit a 3. He hit only 1 3, but he's shown some touch at the free throw line, some touch from the mid-range. I'm sure he's going to stretch out to the 3-point line. Coach Casey has said that. We've seen his ability to guard perimeter players at different times, switch onto wings, point guards, you name it. And then, just at the very least, he's still going to hustle, he's going to rebound, he's going to get offensive boards, and he's going to get putbacks. That's his floor, but he's got the ceiling to be someone who can shoot threes, he can shoot mid-range shots, he can guard players smaller than him, he can do all of these things. So I really like that pick at 16. Isaiah Stewart has shown a lot of signs of being good. And then Saben Lee. Like Saben Lee, the 38th pick. I'd never heard of him. I don't watch college basketball, as I said. And all of a sudden, he's come out and been fantastic. Just in the 7 games that he's played since getting into the team and getting into the rotation, he's averaging 12.6 points a game, 59% from the field, 80% from 3, 3.9 assists, 2.9 rebounds, and just over 1.3 turnovers a game. And that says a lot about his game. It's poised, it's polished. He knows how to read the defense. He knows how to penetrate, get inside, and then drop it off to a big. He can run the pick and roll. He can shoot the 3 ball to a degree. He's not really shooting it. He's a bit hesitant. I think he shot 30% in college, so we'll have to watch that space, but we've seen him knock it down. I don't think it's going to be a complete liability to the point where he's just afraid to take it. But Saben Lee, for the 38th pick, when you look at the second round, he's been the most productive player outside of Theo Maladone. And, well, when you look at actually when Saben Lee has played, he's been even better than Maladone. So we're going to have to watch that space and see him for the rest of the season. But he's been at least the second best second round pick so far, or maybe even the best. So he looks like one of the steals of the draft. Perfect pickup, someone from under the radar. He's looked fantastic. Also, don't compare him to Killian Hayes, 2 years older. They're on the same team. We've got them both. We've got them both. So you don't need to compare them. Saddiq Bey. Do I need to say anything about Saddiq Bey? He's just been fantastic. NBA ready. Traded him for Luke Kennard. What a steal to get Saddiq Bey. Younger, less injury problems, knock on wood, and we don't want Luke to have those injury problems, but he's had them. It doesn't require $16 million a year. Lord have mercy. But just over the last 13 games, pretty much since he's got consistent minutes as a starter, or at least being the first man off the bench, he's averaging 13.8 points a game, 48.4% from the field, 43.3% from three-point range on a lot of attempts, 5.2 rebounds a game, 2 assists a game. Oh yeah, and 91% from the free throw line on about 25 attempts. If you want to question whether his shooting's legit or not, that's normally a good indicator. And to shoot 43% from 3, 48% from field, and 91% from the line, he's been promising. He's been great. Let's put it that way. He's been great. And then Sekou Doumbouya, a lot of Pistons fans were on his case. Let me just reiterate it. He's a project player. He's going to take time. But over the last 2 games, we've just seen it. With Jeremy Grant out of the lineup, like I mentioned, Josh Jackson, guys that are clogging the driving lanes for Sekou. Sekou is someone that needs to be driving. He can shoot the three ball, and that's the allure with him because he has the potential to be able to do a lot of things. I mean, I saw him break down a defender against the Raptors, drive inside and dish it off to the center. He crossed him over, drove inside and dished it off. That was fantastic. That was a glimpse of what he can be. He's shown glimpses of running the floor, blowing past a defender, spinning past someone, finishing with his non-dominant hands. He's shown the ability to dunk on players, shoot three balls, step back threes, step back mid-range shots. And then he's shown the ability to airball shots, hit the side of the backboard, lose focus, defensive assignments, etc., etc. But we've seen glimpses, and that's what he's going to be for the next at least year. Until year 3 or 4, that's when we can truly gauge what he's doing. But we've already seen when he's had more opportunity the last 2 games, he's had 2 of his best games of the season. And then this is just the young players. This isn't talking about the likes of Mason Plumlee, who's been a fantastic signing. Plumlee could really command some value on the trade market. Some people think it's a joke, but $9 million for someone who's proven he's definitely good enough to be an NBA starting center. He could provide some value if the Pistons want to get rid of him, or they still keep him to kind of mentor Isaiah Stewart. Some people saying start Stewart. I think let's just settle down. Let's keep Plumlee as the starter. Stewart can come off the bench. He's establishing a nice connection with Saben Lee. We can really see that unfolding. Obviously, Jeremy Grant has been the highlight. He's been the gem. He's been the all-star level player. He's the guy that you get and you go, that's how the franchise is moving forward. We're moving forward with someone like Grant. He's not getting traded, Celtics fans. It's not happening. Troy Weaver deserves a lot of respect. Executive of the year, I would have him in the conversation. To turn a team that looked hopeless for the next couple of years, it looked like there was no direction, to already looking like one of the more promising young teams in the league, particularly if they strike on the next year's draft. Coach Casey deserves some respect as well, because no matter what you think of his X's and O's, his rotations, he gets these players playing hard for him, and he seems to get the best out of pretty much every player he has under him. It's just the reality. So he does a really good job at that. Whether he's going to be the coach that can lead you to a championship, that's yet to be seen. But he's definitely going to be the coach that is going to help a rebuild. But the Detroit Pistons have managed to do such a fantastic job at rebuilding this team in such a short space of time. The rebuild is nowhere near done. Let's not get it twisted. I am not saying that, but I'm saying the building blocks are already there. And you just struggle to see a world in which Saddiq Bey isn't at the very least a very good role player. Isaiah Stewart the same. Saben Lee could at least be a bench point guard, maybe even better. Killian Hayes has yet to even play many games. Some people thought he was the best prospect in the entire NBA draft, and I still have a lot of hope for him. You've got guys like Josh Jackson coming in looking like good role players, Jeremy Grant looking like an all-star, Mason Plumlee a good role player, good veteran leader, and you expect Troy Weaver to do much of the same at the next draft. If he was able to do this much in the space of a couple of months, imagine what he's working on now. Wayne Ellington might get shipped off, DeLon Wright might get shipped off, Mason Plumlee might get shipped off, and all of a sudden you have such an exciting young team with a clear direction and a clear culture, which the same can't be said for a lot of teams. And to have that happen in just the space of one off season, like bravo Troy Weaver, he's done a fantastic job and he deserves a lot of credit. And so do these players, and so do Coach Casey, for really putting together a promising season so far.